What is happening, football freaks and geeks? I'm Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. The hat's turned around right side. It's the regular glasses instead of the sunglasses. I threatened to bring the intellectual football fan back, and he is back with a vengeance, because it is playoff time, baby. 2013-2014 NFL season, Wildcard Weekend. First week of the playoffs. We're all mad hyped. We're real excited. Let's get into the picks. Just a reminder of the way the format goes for the playoff videos. I'm going to be giving you my straight up pick, my against the spread pick, and my pick on the over-under for every single game. So by the end of it, we're going to have a record straight up, a record against the spread, and a record over-under. Just a reminder, I'm so happy to say I ended the season on a 10-0 against the spread streak to finish, I believe, 21-13. I think was what I ended. I'll have to go back and double check that, but I think it was 21-13 is what I ended up against the spread on the season. So I was real proud of that for my first season picking against the spread. That was a comeback from 11-13, of course, with the 10-0 streak. Here come the picks. We're going to start in the American Football Conference, the AFC, where, of course, the number 1 ranked Denver Broncos at 13-3 and the 12-4 number 2 ranked New England Patriots have a bye on Wildcard Weekend. The 3 versus 6 matchup sees the number 3 ranked Cincinnati Bengals at 11-5 square off with the number 6 ranked, barely made it into the playoffs, but finally made it in, San Diego Chargers at 9-7. The Bengals are 7-point favorites at home with the total of 47. Now, at home this year, Cincinnati was a perfect 8-0. They played like their AFC North rivals, the Baltimore Ravens, typically play at home. They had a 10-point win against Pittsburgh, 4-point win against Green Bay, 7 points against New England, blew out the Jets by 40 points, Cleveland by 21, Indy by 14, 28 against Minnesota, and finally Baltimore by 17 points. Those were all of Cincinnati's 8 wins at home on the season. While on the road, San Diego was a mere 4-4. I guess not a terrible record on the road, but they were only 500. Started with a 3-point win against Philly. They lost against Tennessee by the same score, by 3 points. A 10-point loss to Oakland, a little baffling there. Beat Jacksonville by 18. Lost to the lowly Washington Redskins by 6 points. Lost to Miami by 4 points. Then finished off the season by beating Kansas City by 3 and Denver by 7 on the road. Now, if you take a look at average points scored versus average points allowed between these two teams, typically you're going to see Cincinnati's average season output put up about 24 to 25 points on the average defensive output from the Chargers on the season, whereas if you look at the other side of that coin, Chargers are going to average putting up about 22 points on Cincinnati's defense. When you take a look at how Cincinnati played at home this year versus how the Chargers played on the road, that number grows significantly. San Diego's output drops to 20 points, while Cincinnati's jumps all the way up to 29. That's the average output at home versus San Diego's average defense on the road. And if you take a look at the last 4 games, kind of interesting, the last 4 games of the season, offensive versus defensive output between these two teams, it's pretty much even. It comes out 26-26 by my math. So Cincinnati, average in their last 4 games, would put up 26 points against San Diego's defense, vice versa for San Diego. So let's start with the over-under play here. As I mentioned, the number is 47. I like that number to go over. The over is 6-2 in the last 8 head-to-head matchups between these two teams. Cincinnati is also 6-2 on the over in their last 8 games overall. A little more specious statistic here for you. San Diego is 6-1-1 over in their last 8 games on field turf. And since they're playing in Cincinnati, they're going to be playing on field turf. That's good enough for me. I'm going to tell you to take over 47 points in Cincinnati, San Diego. Straight up here, you got to go with the Bengals. I don't see how you don't go with Cincinnati in this game. The Bengals are 4-2 in their last 6 head-to-head matchups with San Diego. Of course, we're 8-0 at home this year. As far as I'm concerned, Cincinnati was too good at home this year to lose in round 1 in their own building. So I'm going to take Cincinnati here straight up. I also like Cincinnati -7 on the line. The Bengals would be 6-1-1 against the spread at home this year, covering a 7-point spread. So That's what it is in this game. I like San Diego's defense. I don't think it's going to be good enough to hold them here. Going to be a bit of a shootout, but I like Cincinnati -7, Cincinnati straight up to beat San Diego and move to the next round. The 4 versus 5 matchup sees the champions of the AFC South, the Indianapolis Colts, at 11-5 as 2.5-point favorites at home against the number 5 ranked Kansas City Chiefs, also at 11-5. The total for this game is 46.5. Indianapolis at home this year was 6-2, had a very good record at home, including some big wins against some big competition. They beat Oakland by 4 points, then suffered a 4-point setback against Miami. Then they beat Seattle by 6 and beat Denver by 6. Those are 2 huge wins at home coming in back-to-back home games. So that's really big. Then they suffered one of the most baffling losses in the league this year, a 30-point loss at home against St. Louis, which seems really strange to me. But they came back by winning their last 3 home games of the year, beating Tennessee by 8, Houston by 22, and Jacksonville by 20. Kansas City was an identical 6-2 on the road this year. They had a 26-point win in Jacksonville, a 10-point win in Philadelphia, 9 points in Tennessee, and 10 points in Buffalo. Now, they did suffer a 10-point loss to Denver in Denver. Then they came back to beat Washington by 35 points, a huge win there, and beating Oakland by 25 points, suffering a 3-point setback in San Diego in the final game of the year. Now, average points for versus average points given up between these two teams all year, I see this about a 24-22 advantage for Kansas City. Kansas City averaging 26.9 points per game this year versus Indy, whose defense was actually better than you might have thought that it was, only giving up 21 points a game. That's really not terrible considering at times Indy has had, all-world bad defenses. But KC's average defense, they only give up 19.1 points per game this year, so they had a very, very good defense. It's a couple-point advantage for the Chiefs. And taking a look at home versus away, even though the game is at home, the spread gets a little bit wider, a little bit of a bigger gap there for the Colts. Kansas City's defense on the road this year was lights out. They only gave up 17.9 points per game in games on the road. So their defense arguably played better on the road than it did at home. I see this as about a 26-21 advantage for the Chiefs, so that gap, again, gets a little bit bigger. The only saving grace here for the Colts that I see is how they performed in their last 4, because the Colts really picked it up towards the end of the season. It's actually a slight advantage for the Colts, 25-24. Over the last 4 games of the season, the Colts only gave up 15.5 points a game. That is some real good defense. Now, it wasn't the greatest teams that they played, but it was still quite good numbers there. But Kansas City also put up 33 points per game in the last 4 games of the season. So their offense clicking real well right now. That's going to be something to be concerned about. Start again with the over-under play. The number here again, 46.5. I actually like this to stay under. The under is 5-1 in the last 6 head-to-head matchups, and the teams combined only 2-7 over on totals of 46 or more over the season. So 2-7, not real good here. I don't think it's going to go over. I think the two defenses are playing well enough right now to keep this as a low-scoring game. So 46.5, I'm going to tell you to go under. Straight up in this one, I'm taking Kansas City. Now, that might be a bit of a stretch for some people. Indy seems to be a real popular pick here, and rightfully so. Indy is 6-2 in the last 8 head-to-head matchups between these two teams and have more impressive wins at home. But if you take a look at the Colts are banged up right now, especially on the defensive side of the football, and Kansas City's just a better all-around team. So I got to take the Chiefs here. The Chiefs have had a real good season. They're here for a reason, and I'm the biggest Chiefs doubter in the world. I said that right at the beginning of the season. I was one of their biggest doubters, and they turned me around. So call it a gut feeling, but I'm going to go with the Chiefs here. So obviously, I also like Kansas City plus 2.5 against the spread. KC was 7-1 against the spread in their last 8 games on the road and won their only 2013 matchup as an underdog of less than a touchdown. It's good enough for me. If I'm going to take them to win, then I got to take them on the spread. So KC plus 2.5, KC straight up to beat Indianapolis. Let's go to the NFC now, where the number 1 ranked 13-3 Seattle Seahawks and the number 2 ranked 12-4 Carolina Panthers draw the byes in Wildcard Weekend. The 3 versus 6 matchup sees the NFC East champion Philadelphia Eagles at 10-6 take on the number 6 seeded New Orleans Saints at 11-5. The Eagles are 2.5-point favorites at home, with the total being 53.5. Philadelphia at home this year certainly started the season unimpressive. 4 straight home losses before they made the move to Nick Foles. 3-point loss to San Diego, a 10-point loss to KC, a 14-point loss to Dallas, followed up by an 8-point loss to the, at the time, lowly New York Giants. However, they did end the season on a 4-game home winning streak by 8 points to Washington, 3 points to Arizona, 14 points to Detroit, and an absolute clobbering of the Chicago Bears by 43 points. However, if you're going to play New Orleans, you want to play New Orleans in your own building. New Orleans was only 3-5 on the road this year. They started off the season with 2 wins, 2 points at Tampa Bay and 8 points at Chicago. However, they suffered setbacks by 3 points to New England, 6 points to the Jets. They beat Atlanta by 4 in Atlanta, but then lost by 27 points to Seattle in that just embarrassing Monday night, I believe it was Monday Night Football game. 11 points to St. Louis, another one of the most baffling losses in the league, and by 4 points to Carolina. So only 3-5 on the road this season for the Saints. That's got to be concerning. Taking a look at average points scored versus average points allowed on the season, it's actually a slight advantage here for the Saints, 25-23. Saints averaged 25.9 points per game, but only averaged giving up 19 points per game. So they had a very, very good defense, which is kind of the antithesis to what the Saints have been the last couple of seasons. Philly, of course, with a very good average, 27.6 points per game, but they also gave up just under 24. So it's about a 25-23, as I mentioned, advantage for the Saints. But again, Saints were real bad on the road this year. You take a look at their output on the road versus Philly's output at home, that coin completely flips. It becomes a 23-19 advantage for the Philadelphia Eagles. Philly averaged 24 points scored at home this year, so it was a bit below their normal output. They were real good on the road this year, but they only allowed 19.9 points per game versus the Saints, who only scored just under 18 points per game on the road this year. So that is a big advantage, getting them to play in Philadelphia for the Eagles. Taking a look at the last 4, Philadelphia put up 35.5 points per game over their last 4 games in the season, and only gave up 25. So it was a little bit over their average for points allowed, but they more than made up for it with what they've scored. New Orleans put up 25.5 points per game, slightly higher than their season output, but only allowed 18.5. So it becomes very close. It's still a slight edge for the Philadelphia Eagles, 27-25. So let's start with the over-under play here. The number's 53.5. You know what? I like this going under. It seems a bit of a shock with, again, 2 real good offenses here, and offenses that are playing a little bit better lately. But in all 3 of the scenarios that I mentioned above, all of the point totals end up under 53.5. Season average, home versus away, and last 4. And cold weather tends to equal lower scoring, and it's going to be pretty cold in Philadelphia. The weather's going to be fine, but it is going to be cold. Tends to mean lower scoring. So 53.5. I think this is good enough, and I think New Orleans' defense especially is good enough to keep this number under. So I'm going to go under 53.5 in Philly, New Orleans. Straight up here, Saints are my boys. Call me a homer. Call me an Eagles hater. I'm not an Eagles hater. I'm happy they won the division. I certainly didn't want Dallas to win it. But, I just like the Saints here. I don't know why. Again, call it a gut feeling. Despite being a bad road team, the Saints are 4-1 in the last 5 head-to-head matchups between these two. I really like Nick Foles, but NFL rookie coach, NFL rookie quarterback, first playoff game against Drew Brees and Sean Payton. I just like that X factor that Brees and Peyton have. So I'm going to go with New Orleans. Again, call it a gut feeling. Call me a hater if you want to. That's the way I see it. So on the line, of course, I also like New Orleans plus 2.5. The Saints are just 1-3 against the spread as underdogs of under 7 points this season. But one more time, this is my gut feeling. I just think New Orleans is winning this game. So I'm going to take New Orleans plus 2.5 and New Orleans straight up to beat the Eagles. The number 4 ranked NFC North champion Green Bay Packers at just 8-7-1 snuck in there by winning the division, beating Chicago in one of the last games of the year. Taking on the number 5, 12-4 San Francisco 49ers. Can these teams just leave each other alone? Apparently not. The Packers are 2.5-point dogs at home, with the total being 48 points. Green Bay at home this year, just 4-3-1. They had an 18-point win against Washington, a 13-point win against Detroit, and an 18-point win against Cleveland, before suffering the setback of a 7-point loss against Chicago, where they lost Aaron Rodgers, then a 14-point loss to Philadelphia. They tied Minnesota 26-26 in Lambeau, then beat Atlanta by 1 point, losing to Pittsburgh by 7 in their final home game of the year. San Francisco on the road was 6-2 this year. They were a very, very good road team after that 26-point drubbing that they took in Seattle against the Seahawks. They then beat St. Louis by 24, beat Tennessee by 14, and Jacksonville by 32. So definitely sent a message there to some not great teams, but decent. Only lost to New Orleans in New Orleans by 3, then beat Washington by 21, Tampa Bay by 19, finishing the road season with a 3-point win in Arizona. Season averages, home versus away, and last 4, it all favors San Francisco. 26-22 on their overall season averages on the year, 25-21 in Green Bay at home versus San Fran on the road. San Fran actually averaging more points scored on the road than they did at home this year, so slightly better road team maybe even than home team. And through the last 4, 29-25. So San Fran, no matter how good Green Bay kind of gets it, San Fran always seems to be keeping them at arm's reach. Take a look at the over-under here. The number is 48. I'm going to tell you to go over the 48. The over is 6-0 in the last 6 head-to-head matchups between these two teams, and the two teams combine for an 11-9 over in their last 20 games combined. However, 2 of those unders come with higher numbers than this total. So really it's like 13-7 with their actual outputs. That's good enough for me. I'm going to tell you to take over 48. I think this is going to be a shootout. May end up being a one-sided shootout, but a shootout nonetheless. I think this is going over 48 points. Straight up, there's no reason here not to take San Francisco. That's what I'm going to do. San Francisco beat Green Bay Week 1 in Lambeau and have won 3 straight head-to-head matchups going all the way back to that playoff matchup and beyond. 49ers are also currently riding a 6-game win streak. No reason not to take the Niners. I'm also going to take the Niners minus 2.5 against the spread. It's not a lot of points to lay. San Fran's last 3 wins head-to-head have been by more than 6 points against Green Bay. San Francisco's also 4-2 against the spread in their last 6 as a single-digit favorite, which is what they are here. Well, technically 1 point whatever, single-digit point whatever, but still, as a single-digit favorite, they're 4-2 in their last 6 against the spread. Good enough for me. So I'm going to take San Francisco minus 2.5. San Francisco straight up to beat Green Bay. There we go, folks. There's the video for Wildcard Weekend. Going to go over the picks here with you one more time. Starting in the NFC, the 3 versus 6 matchup, New Orleans at Philadelphia. Over-under, I'm going to tell you to take under 53.5 points. Straight up, again, gut feeling, I like the Saints to beat the Eagles. I'm going to take New Orleans straight up and New Orleans plus 2.5 against the spread. 4 versus 5 matchup, San Francisco traveling to Green Bay. I'm going to tell you to take over 48 on the over-under. Straight up here, I like San Francisco. I also like San Francisco minus 2.5. Lay the points on the 49ers against the spread. The AFC 3 versus 6 matchup, over-under, I'm going to tell you to take over 47 points in this. San Diego traveling to Cincinnati to play the Bengals. Straight up, I like the Bengals at home, and I like the Bengals to cover the 7-point spread, so lay the points, Cincinnati minus 7. And the 4 versus 5, Kansas City traveling to Indianapolis. I'm going to tell you to take under 46.5 points in this game. Straight up, I like Kansas City. I like the underdog here, and I like Kansas City plus 2.5 against the spread. picks for Wildcard Weekend. What are your picks for Wildcard Weekend? I want you to put them in the comment section below. Hate and love, you know where it goes. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Again, hit me up in the comment section below with your picks. How did you do against the spread, over, under, and straight up on the season? Let me know that too. It was a great season, and we're knee-deep in playoff time. See you next week.